Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time. Not to some grand ballroom or a bustling marketplace, but into the dimly lit, gas lamp haze of Victorian London. Imagine yourself there, boots squelching in the ever-present mud, the air thick with coal smoke, horse manure, and something elsey of faint, cloying sweetness mixed with desperation. You've just arrived, perhaps on a slow, rattling train from some forgotten rural village, your few worldly possessions clutched tightly in a worn carpet bag. The city, vast and indifferent, stretches out before you, a maze of cobblestone alleys and towering tenements. Every shadow seems to hold a secret, every echo a warning. You're not here for a grand adventure, though. You're here because the crops failed, or your family was evicted, or perhaps, simply, there was no other choice. This isn't the romanticized London of Dickensian novels. This is the grinding, relentless reality for millions, and for some, a particularly stark path. You're young, perhaps 17, maybe even younger, and utterly alone in a metropolis that consumes the vulnerable whole. You probably won't survive this. Not really, not with your innocence intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening live, drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always wild to see where you guys are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the bewildering chaos of the railway station, the cries of porters and newsboys assaulting your ears. The sheer volume of people, all rushing, pushing, and seemingly knowing exactly where they're going, is overwhelming. Your meager funds are dwindling fast. You tried a few places for work, of course. A scullery maid, perhaps. A factory girl, bent over looms in air thick with lint. But those positions are scarce, and the competition fierce. Besides, you're not strong from a life of hard labor, and your hands aren't calloused enough for the factory floor. You hear whispers sometimes in the grimy lodging houses where you try to snatch a few hours of sleep. Whispers of fallen women and unfortunates. You try not to listen too closely, try to ignore the knowing glances from the older women who've seen it all. You cling to the hope of honest work, of a respectable path, but each passing day in this indifferent city grinds that hope down. You sell off a small trinket, a locket perhaps, to buy a stale piece of bread, and the shame burns hot in your cheeks. You learn quickly that hunger is a more potent force than pride. One mainstream historical fact about this period is that London's population exploded during the Victorian era, reaching over 6 million by the turn of the century, creating immense pressure on housing and employment, especially for new arrivals from rural areas. A quirky tidbit: some street vendors would sell hot eels from portable stoves, a cheap and surprisingly popular street food for the working class, that you probably wouldn't touch one with a 10-foot pole right now, hygiene being what it was. Historians still argue whether the sheer scale of urban poverty was primarily a result of industrialization's demands or a failure of governmental social policies. You just know your stomach aches, and the night air bites through your thin shawl. You're cold, you're tired, and every door you've knocked on has either slammed shut or offered something truly terrifying. The respectable world has no place for you. Not anymore. Not here. Not now. The biting wind seems to follow you, wrapping around your threadbare clothes as you wander the labyrinthine streets. Each gas lamp casts long, dancing shadows, making the familiar unfamiliar and the unknown even more unsettling. You clutch your empty purse, the last coin having bought a few hours of sleep on a lumpy mattress in a shared room, filled with the snores and coughs of strangers. The respectable lodging houses, even the cheapest ones, are now out of reach. You begin to notice things, little details that had previously escaped your notice or that you had consciously ignored. The way some women, perhaps not much older than you, stood in doorways, their eyes meeting yours with a strange mix of defiance and pity. The way gentlemen, well-dressed and seemingly respectable, would slow their pace as they passed these women, sometimes exchanging a whispered word. You try to look away, to convince yourself that this isn't what you think it is, but the evidence, stark and undeniable, is everywhere. One particularly cold evening, as you huddle in the recessed doorway of a closed shop, trying to escape a sudden downpour, a carriage splashes by, its wheels churning the muddy street. It's not a grand, private carriage, but a hackney cab, the kind that takes fares. It stops a little way down the street, and a woman descends. She's not dressed like the factory girls or the domestic servants you've seen. Her dress, though perhaps a little too vibrant for high society, is made of good material, and her cloak, despite the rain, looks luxurious. Her hair is artfully styled, and a faint scent, something floral and expensive, seems to linger in the damp air. She glances your way, her gaze lingering for a moment before she turns and slips into a discreetly lit house. It's not a shop, not a residence you'd recognize. It has a certain air, a quiet invitation that speaks volumes without a single sign. You don't approach immediately. Your upbringing, ingrained with notions of virtue and propriety, screams at you. But then your stomach growls, a hollow, aching sound that overrides everything else. You remember the look in that woman's eyes, not condemnation, but something akin to understanding. The cold seeps into your bones and the hunger gnaws. You stand, your legs stiff, and slowly, hesitantly, begin to walk toward that house. Each step is a battle between your ingrained morality and the desperate, undeniable need for warmth, food, and shelter. You think of the stories, the cautionary tales your mother used to tell, but they feel distant and irrelevant in the face of your immediate suffering. A mainstream historical fact is that economic hardship and the vast disparity between rich and poor were primary drivers for women entering prostitution in Victorian England. There were simply very few avenues for independent female survival. A quirky tidbit: some women would carry small, ornate boudoir clocks on their person, ostensibly for timekeeping, but often used as a subtle signal of their availability. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of fallen women was more a symptom of systemic societal neglect or individual moral failing. You pause at the door, your hand hovering over the knocker, a silent prayer forming on your lips, not for salvation, but for strength. This is not a choice made lightly. It is a surrender to circumstance, a desperate grab for a sliver of hope in a world that has offered you none. The door opens with a soft click, revealing a woman who is neither young nor old, but possesses a certain timelessness. She's not beautiful in the conventional sense, but her eyes are sharp, intelligent, and hold a weariness that mirrors the city itself. This is the madam, though you wouldn't know it from her attire, which is more practical than flamboyant. She sizes you up with a single glance, taking in your worn clothes, your hesitant posture, and the desperation etched on your face. There's no pity in her gaze, but neither is there judgment. She's seen it all before countless times. She doesn't speak immediately, allowing the silence to hang in the air, a silent interrogation. The house itself is surprisingly warm, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The air is thick with the scent of perfume, not the delicate floral scent you noticed on the woman who entered earlier, but something heavier, musker, designed to mask other, less pleasant odors. You can hear the faint sounds of music from somewhere within, a piano playing a melancholic tune. Finally, she speaks, her voice low and even, devoid of any unnecessary emotion. She asks your name, your age, where you come from. You answer truthfully, the words tumbling out in a rush, a mixture of fear and relief. She listens without interruption, her expression unchanging. When you're finished, she nods slowly. "So," she says, "you've come to us. Do you understand what this place is?" You nod, though you're not entirely sure you do. You've heard the whispers, the rumors, but the reality of it is still a hazy, terrifying thing. She doesn't elaborate, doesn't try to sugarcoat it. There are rules here, she continues, strict rules. You follow them, and you'll have food, a bed, clothes. You disobey them, and, well, you don't want to disobey them. She leads you further into the house, and the faint music becomes clearer. You pass a dimly lit parlor where a few women are sitting, talking quietly, their faces pale in the candlelight. They glance at you. Their expression's a mixture of curiosity and something else you can't quite decipher. A mainstream historical fact is that brothels in Victorian London ranged from opulent establishments catering to the wealthy to squalid back-alley dens, reflecting the strict social hierarchy of the time. A quirky tidbit: some madams would employ barkers, often young boys, to stand outside and entice potential clients, a practice that was considered both scandalous and a public nuisance. Historians still argue whether the power dynamics within these brothels were primarily exploitative or if some women managed to exert a degree of agency. You try to swallow your fear, to focus on the promise of warmth and food. This is your choice now, your path, however grim. You will learn the rules. You will survive. You tell yourself, even if a small, terrified voice inside you doubts it. The madam stops before a set of stairs, her gaze fixed on you. Tomorrow, she says, you begin your instruction. Be ready. And with that, your old life, your old self, is gone, replaced by something new, something uncertain, something terrifyingly real. The following morning, after a surprisingly decent, if silent, breakfast of porridge and weak tea, you're led to a small, cluttered room. The madam is there, along with another woman, older than you, but still youthful, with a kind, if resigned, expression. This is Sarah, you learn, and she will be your guide, your instructor, in the strange new world you now inhabit. Sarah begins not with grand pronouncements, but with the practicalities. First, cleanliness. You are instructed to bathe thoroughly, not in a luxurious porcelain tub, but in a large, tin basin filled with warm water brought up by one of the housemaids. The scent of carbolic soap, harsh and medicinal, replaces the stale smell of the city that clung to you. It's a small mercy, this enforced cleanliness, a brief moment of forgotten dignity. Then comes the hair. Yours is long and plain, and Sarah sets about transforming it. Ribbons, pins, and perhaps even a heated curling iron, a modern marvel, you realize are employed to create a cascade of artful curls or an elaborate updo. It's an unfamiliar sensation, the tug and pull, the pins digging slightly into your scalp. You barely recognize yourself in the cloudy mirror, your reflection a stranger adorned with an elaborate coiffure. A mainstream historical fact is that elaborate hairstyles were a significant part of Victorian fashion, even for working-class women, though the means to achieve them varied wildly. Next, the clothes. Out go your drab, patched garments, replaced by dresses that are, to your unaccustomed eyes, astonishingly vibrant. Silks, satins, rich velvets, fabrics you've only ever dreamed of touching. The colors are deeper, the neckline's a little lower, the skirt's fuller than anything you've ever worn. They are designed to catch the eye, to accentuate, to hint. You feel a strange mix of discomfort and a fleeting sense of power as you turn before the mirror, the rustle of the fabric a new soundtrack to your life. The corsets, oh, the corsets. You thought your old stays were restrictive, but these are instruments of torture, cinching your waist to an almost impossible degree, pushing your bosom upwards. You gasp for breath, feeling as though you might faint, but Sarah, with a practiced hand, tugs and tightens until you achieve the desired hourglass figure. Beauty is pain, my dear, she says with a weary smile, a phrase you will come to hear often. A quirky tidbit. Some corsets of the era were so restrictive that they could displace internal organs, leading to various health complaints, though your madam would likely dismiss such concerns as mere dramatics. Finally, the face. Sarah produces a small pot of white paste, a faint rose scent rising from it. Rice powder, she explains, gently dabbing onto your skin to lighten your complexion, a sign of refinement and leisure in an era where suntanned skin indicated manual labor. Then comes the rouge, a deep crimson for your lips and cheeks, applied sparingly but effectively to create a flush of health that isn't quite natural. Your eyes are outlined with kohl, making them seem larger, more alluring. You stare at your reflection, seeing a manufactured version of yourself. This isn't you anymore. It's a carefully constructed persona, a mask you will learn to wear effortlessly. Historians still argue whether the extreme emphasis on physical appearance for women in Victorian society was primarily a reflection of male desire or a complex societal construct tied to class and status. You feel a profound sense of detachment, watching yourself being transformed, a butterfly emerging, not from chrysalis, but from a carefully painted illusion. The transformation complete, you're led to the parlor, the very room you glimpsed earlier. It's late afternoon now, and the gas lamps have been lit, casting a warm, slightly melancholic glow. The air is still heavy with the scent of perfume, but now you recognize it as a blend of several different, clashing fragrances. You're introduced to the other women of the house, a small cohort, perhaps 5 or 6 in total, each in various states of readiness, some already in their evening attire, others still in dressing gowns. They offer polite, almost dismissive, nods and fleeting smiles. There's an unspoken understanding among them, a shared secret. Sarah, your temporary mentor, guides you to a plush velvet settee, its cushions worn smooth by countless occupants. You wait here, she instructs quietly. Be presentable. Be polite. And so you wait. This is a significant part of the daily routine, the quiet anticipation that hangs in the air before the evening truly begins. The parlor is designed for this very purpose. Comfortable, yet formal enough to impress. There's a grand piano in one corner, its keys yellowed with age, and a collection of potted ferns that look perpetually thirsty. A small, caged bird chirps occasionally, its song a startlingly bright counterpoint to the hushed atmosphere. You try to mimic the other women, who sit with an air of practiced idleness, some reading novels, others stitching, a few simply staring into the middle distance. You pick up a book from a nearby table, a popular romance, but the words blur on the page. Your mind races, a whirlwind of anxieties and half-formed questions. What will happen tonight? What will be expected of you? The boredom is a surprisingly potent emotion, a slow-burning ache that settles deep in your bones. It's not the physical exhaustion of farm labor, but a mental fatigue, a constant state of alert combined with absolute inaction. You listen to the ticking of the ornate grandfather clock in the hall, each second stretching into an eternity. You try to remember the rhythm of your old life, the comforting predictability of the rising and setting sun, the chores that filled your days. Here, time seems to lose all meaning, dictated not by the sun, but by the capricious arrival of clients. A mainstream historical fact is that waiting rooms or parlors were standard features in more respectable brothels, designed to create an atmosphere of leisure and refinement, attempting to mask the commercial nature of the interactions. A quirky tidbit: some madams would provide their women with courtesy books filled with polite conversation starters and historical anecdotes to appear more educated and engaging to their clientele. You wonder if anyone would notice if you fell asleep, but the madam's sharp eyes seem to be everywhere, even when she's not physically present. Historians still argue whether the apparent leisure of these waiting periods offered genuine respite for the women or merely amplified their underlying anxieties. You adjust your corset, try and find a comfortable position, a futile endeavor. The evening stretches out before you, an unwritten chapter, filled with unknown encounters and forced smiles. The first few clients are a blur of polite nods, forced smiles, and stiff conversation. You're learning to master the art of appearing engaged, of listening intently to stories that hold no interest for you. Sarah had given you a few pointers: smile, but not too broadly. Listen, but don't interrupt. And always make them feel important. It's a delicate dance, a constant performance. You sit beside them on the settee, perhaps accept a glass of diluted sherry, which you barely sip, and answer their questions with practiced vagueness. Some clients are boisterous, telling long, rambling tales of their day at the stock exchange or their latest business venture. Others are quiet, their eyes holding a distant sadness, and they seem to seek only a sympathetic ear. You learn to read their subtle cues, to understand what they're truly looking for beyond the superficial pleasantries. Your heart pounds the first time a client makes a more direct proposition. It's a man with a booming laugh and a surprisingly gentle handshake. He asks if you would accompany him upstairs for a private conversation. Your throat tightens, but you remember Sarah's calm instructions. Always maintain your composure. It's a business transaction. You manage a polite, almost practiced smile and nod. The stairs creak under your feet as you ascend, each step a further departure from the girl you once were. The rooms upstairs are simpler than the parlor, furnished with a bed, a washstand, and a small sitting area. They are functional, designed for privacy and little else. You discover the nuances of the interaction quickly. The delicate balance between aloofness and charm, the careful management of expectations. It's less about physical intimacy and more about the illusion of connection, of undivided attention. You learn to keep your mind detached, to float above the situation, observing it as if from a great distance. A mainstream historical fact is that many brothels operated on a tiered system, with different rooms and services priced accordingly, from common parlor girls to kept women in private apartments. A quirky tidbit: some clients, particularly those with a more romantic inclination, would bring small gifts for the women, ranging from trinkets to bouquets of flowers, which were often seen as a sign of respect, however fleeting. Historians still argue whether the emotional labor involved in these interactions was more taxing than the physical demands of the profession. You find yourself becoming adept at the theatricality of it all, at feigning interest in subjects you know nothing about, at offering comfort you don't feel. It's a strange, almost out-of-body experience watching yourself perform this role. You wonder if the clients see through the facade, or if they, too, are playing a part in this elaborate charade. The evening wears on, a repetitive cycle of introductions, conversations, and brief, transactional encounters. You are a mirror, reflecting back whatever desire the client projects, and in doing so, you slowly, imperceptibly begin to lose a piece of yourself. Life within the brothel, you quickly learn, is not one of equality. There's a subtle but undeniable hierarchy, a pecking order among the women. At the top, of course, is the madam, her word law, her gaze capable of freezing you in your tracks. Below her are the more experienced women, like Sarah, who have been in the house for years. They command a certain respect, a quiet authority born of their longevity and their understanding of the madam's unspoken rules. They often get the more lucrative clients, the ones who pay better or who are less demanding. You, as a newcomer, are at the bottom. You receive the less desirable clients, the ones who are impatient or difficult, or perhaps simply those who are quickly passing through. You observe the dynamics, the subtle alliances, and the quiet rivalries that play out within the confines of the parlor. There's the demure one, who rarely speaks, but has a way of captivating attention with just a glance. There's the boisterous one, whose laughter rings out a little too loudly, perhaps a defense mechanism against the quiet despair. You learn to navigate these unspoken territories. You offer small kindnesses, a shared cup of tea, a sympathetic nod, and in return, you receive glimpses of advice, warnings about certain clients, or a quiet understanding that transcends words. Sometimes there are arguments, hushed but furious, over a perceived slight or a client stolen. The madam, however, always intervenes swiftly, her voice a low growl that silences all dissent. Unity, or at least the appearance of it, is paramount for the smooth running of the house. A mainstream historical fact is that many brothels fostered an internal social structure among the women, often based on age, experience, and perceived attractiveness, which could lead to both camaraderie and intense competition. A quirky tidbit: some women would adopt stage names, often romantic or exotic, to create a new identity for their professional lives, further distancing themselves from their former selves. Historians still argue whether the bonds forged between women in these establishments offered genuine support and sisterhood, or if the inherent competition for clients made true camaraderie impossible. You find yourself gravitating towards Sarah, her steady presence a small comfort in this bewildering new existence. She doesn't offer grand pronouncements, but her quiet gestures a shared glance, a small, knowing smile speak volumes. You learn that despite the shared profession, each woman carries her own burden, her own story, hidden beneath layers of silk and rouge. The air sometimes feels thick with unspoken sorrows, punctuated by the forced cheerfulness of the evenings. You are all in this together, yet utterly alone. The ever-present threat of illness is a constant, gnawing anxiety, a silent companion to the daily routine. In Victorian London, disease lurked everywhere, in the damp, crowded tenements, in the polluted water, in the very air you breathed. But within the brothel, the risks were amplified. You hear whispers of the pox, a terrifying, disfiguring illness, and other ailments that steal a woman's health, her beauty, and ultimately her life. The madam, ever pragmatic, enforces a strict, if rudimentary, system of medical checks. These are not by trained physicians, of course, but by a gruff, elderly woman known only as nurse, who visits weekly. Her methods are crude, her remedies often more frightening than the symptoms themselves. You line up with the other women, a quiet procession of anxiety. Nurse inspects you with a cold, impersonal gaze. Her tools are simple: a lamp, a few questionable instruments, and a terrifyingly confident demeanor. She dispenses concoctions in dark glass bottles, bitter-tasting tonics, and sometimes a foul-smelling salve. You learn to dread these visits, to hide any ache or twinge, fearing the pronouncement that would mean isolation, or worse, dismissal from the house of fate, almost as bad as the illness itself. A mainstream historical fact is that venereal diseases, particularly syphilis and gonorrhea, were rampant in Victorian society, and their treatment was often ineffective, painful, and highly stigmatized. The remedies she prescribes are a bizarre mix of folk medicine and what passed for professional medical advice. You might be given a dose of mercury, a common but highly toxic treatment for syphilis, which would leave you trembling and nauseous. Or perhaps a poultice of herbs meant to draw out bad humors. You hear stories, too, of women who tried to conceal their ailments, only for them to worsen, leading to tragic outcomes. A quirky tidbit: some desperate women would resort to ingesting various dangerous substances, like arsenic, in tiny doses, believing it would improve their complexion or cure certain ailments, often with devastating long-term effects. You learn to be wary, to trust your own instincts, however unreliable they might be. Historians still argue whether the lack of effective medical care for prostitutes was primarily due to societal indifference and moral judgment, or simply the limited medical knowledge of the era. You swallow the bitter medicine nurse offers, try not to gag, and imagine the thousands of other women across London doing the same, hoping against hope that this week you'll be spared the worst. The fear is a constant companion, a dull throb beneath the surface of your carefully constructed composure. It reminds you that even within the relative safety of the brothel walls, your body is not entirely your own, and its frailties are a constant liability. Despite the constant pressures and the ever-present anxieties, life within the brothel isn't entirely devoid of moments of respite. There are brief, fleeting joys, small pockets of ordinary life that somehow manage to bloom even in this extraordinary setting. You discover the quiet camaraderie among the women, a shared understanding that needs no words. In the mornings, before the house truly wakes, you might sit with Sarah over a cup of tea, exchanging knowing glances as the madam barks orders to the housemaids. You might share a quiet laugh over a particularly absurd client or complain about the tightness of your corset. These are small moments, almost imperceptible, but they are vital, offering a sense of connection in a world that is designed to isolate you. Sometimes there are outings. Not grand excursions, of course, but perhaps a trip to the market with one of the housemaids, just to pick up supplies. The madam allows it, perhaps recognizing the need for a brief taste of the outside world. Stepping out into the bustling streets, even for a short while, feels like a breath of fresh air, a momentary escape from the perfumed confinement of the house. You see ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, shopkeepers haggling, children playing hopscotch on the pavement, delivery carts rattling by. It's a poignant reminder of the life you once knew and the life you can no longer have, but also a simple pleasure in the vibrancy of the city. A mainstream historical fact is that while highly restricted, some women in brothels were occasionally allowed limited excursions outside the establishment, often chaperoned, for practical purposes or as a small privilege. Then there are the small indulgences. The madam provides for your basic needs, but any extra comforts are earned. Perhaps a new ribbon for your hair, or a small piece of chocolate purchased with a hard-won tip. These aren't grand luxuries, but they are yours, a small measure of autonomy in a life where so much is dictated. You might spend a quiet afternoon reading a novel, lost in a story that transports you far from the gaslit parlor. Or perhaps you spend an hour by the window, watching the rain fall, simply existing without the pressure to perform. A quirky tidbit: some madams, if their establishment was particularly successful, might host small, private parties for the women on rare occasions, featuring music and dancing, a brief illusion of a normal social life. Historians still argue whether these occasional periods of leisure and camaraderie genuinely improved the quality of life for the women, or merely served as a way for the madams to maintain control and prevent rebellion. You cling to these moments, these brief respites from the relentless performance, knowing they are fragile and fleeting. They are the small, flickering candles in the vast darkness of your new existence, reminding you that even here, in this strange and demanding life, a sliver of your own self remains, capable of finding a quiet joy. The madam, for all her strictness, provides for your immediate needs: a bed, food, clothes, even the occasional indulgence. But this provision comes at a steep price, one that binds you as effectively as any physical chain. You quickly learn about the house accounts, the ledger where every expenditure, no matter how small, is meticulously recorded. Your new dresses, the rice powder and coal, the weekly visits from nurse, even the porridge you eat for breakfast, it's all tallied. You are told you are in debt to the house, a sum that seems to grow faster than you can ever hope to diminish it. Each client you see, each coin that changes hands, a portion of it goes to the madam, and another portion is supposedly chipped away at your ever-growing debt. But the numbers never seem to shrink, not really. There's always a new expense, a fresh repair to the house, or a sudden need for new linen that is mysteriously added to your individual ledger. You try to keep track in your head, to do the sums, but the figures are deliberately vague, the calculations opaque. It's a system designed to keep you beholden, to ensure that escape is not just difficult, but seemingly impossible. You realize that your dependence is not just on the madam's goodwill, but on this invisible, accumulating tally of debt. You are in essence working to pay off a debt that is continually renewed, a Sisyphean task. A mainstream historical fact is that debt bondage was a common method of control in Victorian brothels, effectively trapping women in the profession by ensuring they always owed more than they could earn. You hear stories from the older women about attempts to leave, of arguments with the madam over their accounts, and how those arguments invariably ended with the women still indebted, still confined. The madam's power is absolute, backed by the implicit threat of being cast out onto the streets with nothing, or worse, of having your shame exposed to any family you might still have. It's a very clever, very cruel system. A quirky tidbit: some madams would even charge the women for breakages or damages to the house, no matter how minor, further increasing their debt. Historians still argue whether the extreme financial exploitation of these women was primarily a symptom of the era's brutal economic realities or a deliberate and cynical strategy by madams to maximize profit and control. You sit in the parlor, listening to the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock, and the sound seems to mock you, counting down not the hours of the day, but the endless accumulation of your financial servitude. You are fed, clothed, and housed, but your freedom, the most valuable currency of all, is held captive by a ledger you can never truly balance. The outside world, despite your confinement, still manages to intrude in various, often unwelcome, ways. One of the most terrifying intrusions comes in the form of the police, or more specifically, the morality campaigns that occasionally swept through London. You'd hear whispers, a ripple of unease before the actual event. They're cracking down. Suddenly, the madam would be even more on edge, her sharp glances scanning for any hint of trouble. The very existence of places like yours, while tolerated, was also a constant target for reformers, religious groups, and politicians eager to demonstrate their commitment to public decency. A mainstream historical fact is that various social purity movements gained significant traction in Victorian England, often leading to increased police surveillance and raids on brothels, though these efforts were often sporadic and unevenly enforced. Sometimes, the raids would happen without warning. A sudden, insistent pounding on the front door, the madam's face tightening with grim resignation. The gasps and hurried movements of the other women, scrambling to appear as demure and respectable as possible, or to hide anything incriminating. You'd be herded into a common room, made to sit stiffly, your heart hammering against your ribs. Uniformed constables, their faces grim and unyielding, would sweep through the house, their eyes missing nothing. They weren't there to help you. They were there to enforce the law, however selectively applied. You'd hear the heavy tread of their boots upstairs, the muffled sounds of drawers being pulled open, the quick, sharp questions directed at the madam. It was a terrifying display of power, a reminder of how precarious your existence truly was. If you were particularly unlucky, you might be among those rounded up, taken to the local station for questioning. The indignity of it, the shame of being paraded through the streets, even in a closed carriage, was almost as bad as the fear of what lay ahead. There would be formal charges of disorderly conduct or vagrancy, and a brief appearance before magistrate. Sometimes, the madam would pay a fine to have her girls released, calculated cost of doing business. Other times, if you were deemed particularly troublesome, or if the campaign was unusually severe, you might face a short stint in a workhouse or even a Magdalene asylum, institutions designed to rehabilitate fallen women, often through harsh labor and moral instruction. A quirky tidbit: some brothels would have secret passages or hidden rooms where women could quickly conceal themselves during a police raid, though these were rare and often known only to the madam and her most trusted girls. Historians still argue whether these purity campaigns were genuinely effective in reducing prostitution, or if they merely pushed the trade further underground and made the lives of the women even more dangerous. You'd emerge from these encounters shaken, your carefully constructed composure fractured, reminded that your life was constantly under scrutiny, constantly at risk, vulnerable to the whims of society's moral arbiters. The brief taste of freedom during an outing now felt like a cruel joke, a stark contrast to the heavy hand of the law. You've seen women come and go, some disappearing without a trace, others leaving with a carriage packed and a hopeful glint in their eyes. The possibility of leaving, of somehow escaping this life, is a constant, distant beacon. For some, it's a client, a man who takes a genuine liking to them and offers a respectable life, perhaps as his mistress in a small apartment, or even, in rare and scandalous cases, as his wife. These stories are whispered in hushed tones, almost mythical in their rarity, yet they provide a flicker of hope. You watch these women depart, a strange mix of envy and genuine relief in your heart. You wonder if they truly find happiness, or if the stigma of their past follows them like a persistent shadow. A mainstream historical fact is that while rare, some women did manage to leave prostitution through the support of patron, marriage, or by saving enough money to start a new life. Then there are those who simply manage to save enough. It's a slow, arduous process, fighting against the madam's cunning accounting and the constant pull of debt. Every extra shilling tucked away, every coin hidden in a secret seam of a dress, is a small act of rebellion, a brick laid on the path to freedom. They might aim to open a small shop, perhaps a millinery or a laundry, or simply to return to their families, if such a return is even possible. You learn the quiet art of frugality, of denying yourself even small pleasures to squirrel away a few more pennies. It's a gamble, a desperate hope that you can accumulate enough capital to truly break free. You see the determined glint in the eyes of women saving, the way they hoard their meager earnings, resisting the temptation of frivolous purchases. A quirky tidbit: some women would invest their carefully saved money in small, portable valuables like jewelry or gold coins, as these were easier to conceal and transport if they had to leave quickly. Of course, not all departures are happy ones. Some leave because their health has failed, their bodies ravaged by disease, or the sheer exhaustion of a life. They might be sent to workhouses or, if they have no other recourse, simply left to fend for themselves on the streets, a grim reminder of the alternative to life within the brothel walls. You learn to steel yourself against these departures, to try not to imagine their fates, knowing that your own could be similar if you're not careful, if you do not fight for every breath, every client, every penny. Historians still argue whether the apparent success stories of women leaving the profession were truly empowering, or if the societal judgment they faced often made their new lives merely a different form of confinement. You sometimes find yourself daydreaming, imagining a small cottage in the countryside, the smell of fresh earth, the quiet hum of bees, a life utterly devoid of gaslight and forced smiles. It's a powerful fantasy, one that fuels your determination to endure, to keep going, to fight for that elusive freedom. Time, that relentless, indifferent master, marches on, and with each passing year, you notice the subtle, then not so subtle, changes in yourself and in the women around you. Youth, you learn, is the most valuable currency in this particular trade, and it is a currency that depreciates rapidly. The lines around your eyes deepen, etched not by laughter, but by exhaustion and the constant tension in your shoulders. Your skin, once fresh and dewy, takes on a pallor, a slight transparency from the gaslight, and a lack of proper sunlight. The madam's scrutiny becomes sharper, her critiques more frequent, as if she is personally offended by the natural progression of age. A younger, fresher face might arrive, filled with the same desperate hope you once possessed, and you see the madam's eyes linger, already making calculations. You witness the decline in others. Sarah, your quiet mentor, begins to spend more time in her room, complaining of aches and a persistent cough. Her movements become slower, her eyes holding an even deeper weariness. She gets fewer clients, and those she does receive are often the less desirable ones, the ones who seek a fleeting moment of company rather than youthful beauty. You hear whispers of women being moved to less reputable establishments, lower houses where the prices are cheaper and the standards even lower, a grim descent down the social ladder of the underworld. Or worse, they simply disappear, swallowed by the vast, indifferent city, their fates unknown. A mainstream historical fact is that aging was a significant challenge for women in prostitution, as youth and beauty were highly valued, leading to declining income and increased vulnerability to poverty and illness. The future, once a vague, terrifying unknown, now begins to solidify into a more immediate, chilling reality. What happens when your beauty fades completely, when the lines are too deep, the weariness too obvious? The madam's charity, never boundless, would surely dry up. You might be offered work as a housemaid, a drudge, a shadow in the halls where you once held court. Or perhaps, the dreaded thought, the street itself, cold and unforgiving. A quirky tidbit: some women, desperate to maintain their youthful appearance, would experiment with dangerous cosmetics or even primitive forms of cosmetic surgery, often with disfiguring results. Historians still argue whether the harsh realities of aging for these women were primarily a consequence of their chosen profession or simply an amplified reflection of broader societal ageism and the limited opportunities for older women in Victorian society. You look in the mirror, past the carefully applied rouge and kohl, and see the fleeting nature of your current existence reflected in your own eyes. The laughter of the younger girls sometimes feels like a mournful echo, reminding you that time is not on your side, and that the quiet dread of the future is now a far more pressing concern than the anxieties of the past. Despite the silks and satins, the carefully applied makeup, and the manufactured smiles, the mark of your profession is indelible, visible not on your skin, but in the knowing glances of strangers, in the hushed whispers that follow you like a shadow. Society, with its rigid moral codes, had a very clear categorization for women like you. Fallen. It was a label that stuck regardless of the circumstances that led you to this life. You couldn't walk down a respectable street without feeling eyes on you, judging, condemning. The very air seemed to thicken with unspoken scorn. A mainstream historical fact is that fallen women were highly stigmatized in Victorian society, often ostracized by their families and denied opportunities for reintegration into mainstream life, even if they left prostitution. You learn to recognize the subtle cues, the swift avoidance of eye contact by women in bonnets, the muttered disapproval from passing gentlemen. Even when you are merely walking to the market under Sarah's watchful eye, you feel the weight of public perception. It's a heavy burden, this constant awareness that you exist outside the bounds of polite society. Your name, if it were known, would be synonymous with shame. Your past, if ever revealed, would taint everything you touched. This public condemnation isn't just an abstract concept. It's a tangible force that shapes your daily interactions, limiting your movements and reinforcing your confinement. It creates a chilling barrier between you and the respectable world you once inhabited, making the thought of ever truly returning to it a distant, impossible dream. There's a subtle irony to it all. The very men who frequent the house, the pillars of society who demand your services in the dim anonymity of the evening, are often the same ones who would condemn you with the harshest words in the light of day. It's a hypocrisy that stings, even as you learn to accept it as another bizarre facet of this world. You develop a thick skin, a protective layer of indifference, but the knowledge of how you are perceived still seeps in a persistent chill. A quirky tidbit. To avoid public recognition, some clients would wear disguises, such as false beards or dark cloaks, when visiting brothels, while simultaneously condemning the women they paid. Historians still argue whether the extreme societal stigma placed on prostitutes was a genuine reflection of Victorian morality or the convenient means of controlling female sexuality and maintaining rigid class distinctions. You understand that this stigma is not something you can wash off like the scent of cheap perfume. It is etched into your very being, a brand that society has pressed upon you, and it is a burden you will likely carry for the rest of your days, regardless of where your path might lead. The years have passed, marked by the constant rhythm of the house, the hushed mornings, the expectant evenings, the blurred faces of countless clients. You've seen madams come and go, some harsher than others, but the fundamental structure, the insidious web of debt and dependence, remains unchanged. The young girl who stumbled into London, desperate and terrified, is a ghost, a fading memory obscured by layers of experience and survival. You're no longer that girl. You are hardened, perhaps, but also resilient. You've learned the sharp edges of human nature and the surprising kindnesses that can exist in unexpected places. The scents of perfume and stale cigar smoke are now as familiar as the air you breathe. You might be contemplating your next move, or perhaps for the first time in a long time, you simply exist in the present. The fear of old age, once a distant shadow, is now a more tangible concern. You watch the younger women, their faces fresh and unlined, and see echoes of your own past, a painful reminder of the fleeting nature of youth. Will you be like Sarah, fading into the background, or will you find another path? The answers remain elusive. The world outside has changed too, subtly but surely. New inventions, new ideas, new social debates hum beneath the surface of Victorian society. Yet within these walls, time often feels stagnant, a perpetual twilight. You carry the stories of the house within you, the quiet confessions of lonely men, the hushed anxieties of your fellow women, the secrets whispered in the dark. These experiences have shaped you, irrevocably altering your perception of the world. You've seen the underbelly of polite society, the hidden desires, and the stark realities. This knowledge, though gained at a heavy cost, is now part of you. A mainstream historical fact is that many women who spent significant time in prostitution carried psychological scars and faced ongoing social challenges, even if they physically left the profession. A quirky tidbit: some women found a surprising sense of agency in their ability to manipulate the expectations of their male clients, turning the tables in small, subversive ways. Historians still argue whether the long-term psychological impact on these women was primarily due to the direct trauma of their work or the pervasive societal condemnation they faced. The future remains unwritten, a murky path stretching before you. Perhaps you'll manage to save enough. Perhaps a kind hand will offer a way out. Or perhaps you'll find a measure of peace simply by enduring, by continuing to survive in a world that never truly wanted you to. The gaslight flickers, casting long shadows on the parlor walls. The soft hum of the fan is a comforting drone. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you're simply a woman in a room, breathing, existing, waiting for whatever tomorrow may bring. The world outside is hushed now, the city's restless energy slowly settling into a gentle slumber. The gas lamps dim, their soft glow a comforting reassurance against the encroaching darkness. Your journey tonight into the forgotten corners of Victorian London has come to an end. Allow the imagery to fade, the sounds to soften, and the complexities of that harsh past to recede into the realm of history. You are safe, nestled in your own time, in your own comfortable space. Let any lingering thoughts of gaslight and debt drift away like smoke, leaving only the quiet stillness of your room. Your mind is free to wander now, light as a feather, unburdened by the weight of history or the anxieties of another's past. Just breathe slowly and deeply. Feel the comforting stillness wash over you, a gentle wave carrying you towards the shores of peaceful sleep. The echoes of the past are quiet now, replaced by the soft whisper of the night.